Boxing news.
What I was wondering when this card was announced was why not Baumgardner against Amanda Serrano? You've got Serrano with all those belts at 126, Baumgardner sitting there at 30. I have to imagine it crossed your mind to have those two mix it up. Why was that fight not among the first you were looking to make?
Yeah, we want to make that fight happen. And personally, I think for me, it's one of my favorite fights that I could see in women's boxing. And so I've been pushing for it on my end of things, trust me. And we have time though, we have time. That's the beauty of these things. And, even just personally in my career, it's like, all these names, all these people want to fight. We're going to get to it, just everyone can be a little bit patient. But I believe that's going to happen at some point, and it makes sense. And I think it's one of the biggest fights to make in boxing, period.
A ray of light at the end of the tunnel for Alicia Baumgardner's bid to corner a fight with Amanda Serrano, as this would be the first sign I've seen of top brass at MVP attempting to make that fight. Because up until this point, the only one advocating for it has been Alicia. Now Jake is advocating for it, saying that in time, they'll make it. But do they actually have time, since Amanda Serrano means for this to be her final year in the sport? She already fought once this year. She's set to fight for a second time on the undercard of Hahn versus Holm 2, leaving very little time in what remains of this year beyond that fight to make a Baumgardner fight happen. And I think, personally, it would also take not just time, but money. A lot of it. Amanda Serrano was reported to have made an estimated $9 million for the Katie Taylor trilogy that she and Katie headlined on Netflix. I do not expect her to get that same amount of money for Alicia Baumgardner. Why not? Because Alicia is not Katie Taylor. She doesn't bring to the table all of those traveling Irish to purchase a ticket or watch it at home. Smaller name, smaller purse. I would guess somewhere in the neighborhood of $3 to $5 million is what would make sense for that fight for Amanda. Anywhere in between 3 and 5, which isn't what she got for Katie Taylor, but it's still a lot. For Alicia, I would imagine the purse being somewhere in the neighborhood of 1.5 to 2, substantially less than what Amanda would get for obvious reasons. She's not as big a name as Amanda Serrano. She's not on equal footing with her. 1.5, 2.5 sounds reasonable. Now you're thinking to yourself, what makes that a reasonable number? Well, do you think that Alicia Baumgardner's getting 1.5 to 2.5 per fight right now? No, of course not. You want to idealize a scenario, fix it to where this fight is actually viable. 3 to 5 for Amanda, 1.5 to 2.5 for Alicia. Those numbers specifically, because you don't want to kick out so much money to do the fight that you're venturing into pay-per-view territory, where you're spending so much to do it, the only way to recoup the money is to put it behind a paywall. It's a bad idea, especially in this economy, this boxing landscape, where piracy is at an all-time high, pay-per-view sales are down, piracy is up. Would Netflix pick it up? Perhaps, if it's priced reasonably, they might. It's not Taylor versus Serrano 2. It's not Taylor versus Serrano 3. The operational costs are not gonna be the same for Serrano versus Baumgardner. It's big, and it can do well if you price it reasonably. And it's not a guarantee that Netflix gets involved, so don't get attached to that idea either. What about on ESPN? MVP recently inked a deal with them. If they throw some money at this thing, but they don't bill it as a pay-per-view, what could it do there? Alicia Baumgardner's fight this past Friday is reported to have posted an estimated 305,000 viewers on a Friday night. That's actually not a bad number for a low-profile fight against a low-profile opponent. Tack on an Amanda Serrano, not behind a paywall, on ESPN linear, and that number grows exponentially. You've no idea. For this next part, you really have to understand boxing and how fights take on a life of their own. Synergy. What does it do? If you did this fight on ESPN linear, not behind a paywall, I would put the number for this fight on the night anywhere in between 2 million to 3 million viewers. That's a big number. For a perspective, it was in 2018, I believe it was. That's just about what Terrence Crawford brought to the ESPN Plus platform fighting Jose Benavidez, what was recorded as the most watched fight in all of combat sports that year. More watched even than UFC fights. And it was in the neighborhood of close to 3 million viewers. I believe that Amanda and Alicia can do that. Robust numbers. And what were they paying Terence Crawford at the time? $3 million plus for a fight. Like I'm saying, they should pay Amanda $3 million plus for this one. Somewhere in between 3 and 5. And for Alicia, somewhere in between 1.5 to 2.5. Nothing insane, nothing astronomical, keeping a cap on the operational budget so that it doesn't have to be billed as a pay-per-view. You really have to idealize this situation, and you also have to hope that those numbers actually work for the two teams, for the respective fighters. I don't actually know what Amanda would want for a Baumgardner fight, and I don't actually know what Baumgardner wants for a Serrano fight. They both might want more than that, and if they do, can't make those numbers work. Well, not on ESPN. Maybe on Netflix. Maybe, but like I said, there's no guarantee that they get involved. That's more of a fairy tale scenario. Big part of the reason I maintain a healthy level of skepticism when it comes to this fight and whether or not it'll happen, even if Jake is pushing for it, you have to find the money to do it, because I think at this late stage in Amanda's career, it would take a lot of money to get her to take on another dangerous fight, and yet another fight that would require her to move up in weight. You gotta pay to play, and that's the bottom line. Elsewhere in the world of boxing, Oscar De La Hoya with a few choice words for Conor Benn, saying, Conor Benn, you went on a press tour saying you want to fight Ryan Garcia and every other champion. How the fuck do you plan on doing that when you're signed to Zuffa, who only lets you fight for their unicorn piece of shit belt? It's not exactly accurate. It's a valid question, but Zuffa doesn't have a problem with their fighters fighting for other alphabet titles. That was established when they signed Jai Opataya and paid the sanctioning fees for his fight. Then how is it a valid question? It's a valid question because how does Conor Benn expect to get a Golden Boy Promotions fighter in the ring if he's signed to Dana White? Does he not know that Oscar De La Hoya and Dana White hate each other? That's what makes it a valid question. Now, for what might serve as an answer, it was veteran boxing scribe Abraham Gonzalez who accurately pointed out Zuffa did mention doing collaborative events like the ones they do with Ring Magazine, so I'm sure that a Ryan Garcia fight would be a Ring Magazine event. Turkey. Let Turkey pay for it. All roads seem to lead back to Turkey LL Sheikh, who would serve as the mediator for this transatlantic fight, this transatlantic rivalry, not just between the fighters, but between their promoters. Though, of course, if you have to rely on Turkey to do the fight, not Dana White, not Zuffa Boxing, but Turkey specifically, then what was the point in even going over there? You could have did that at Matchroom without burning any bridges. You know, the fight might have actually been easier to make if he stayed at Matchroom, because Matchroom and Golden Boy jointly are on DAZN. They could have built it as a pay-per-view on their platform. More in the catalog to spruce up their ultimate tier package. I know that Oscar De La Hoya doesn't like Eddie Hearn, but he likes Dana White even less. Hard feelings and professional rivalries aside, this fight might actually still happen if for no other reason than it's a big one. Money talks. Turkey throws money at this thing. It behooves Oscar De La Hoya to play ball, because all he's got to do then is sit back and collect his cut at no expense to him or Golden Boy's budget. It's pure profit. For a fight that Ryan Garcia stands a very strong chance of winning. After his performance against the faded, shot-to-shit Regis Prograis, nobody thinks Conor Benn is a world beater, not even his own countrymen.
Regis Prograis said that he thinks Conor's around British level. I mean, from what you've seen, obviously, in the two Eubank fights and the Regis fight, do you see a British level fight or do you see something more?
You know, look, it's not time for me to dig that like that. I've said all along that he's not world class, and he's certainly not world class yet, but he's also been pushed into that so quick before the drug failure. He was not ready for world level yet, but as crazy as it was, he became a massive name after failing the drug test, you know, and his fault or not? No, not really his fault, but now he's calling world-class fighters out. He's in Shakur Stevenson and that, and he's not ready yet, but he's only going to find out that when he takes that leap. He's being matched very well by Eddie for years. Chris Algieri, Chris Van Heerden, you know, all non-punchers. Before Regis Prograis, up at 150. You He's been matched very well his whole career. And now he's the name he is. I think he's got to take that leap now into a challenging fight where he's maybe an underdog.
That is what former WBO junior middleweight champion Liam Smith had to say about it. Commonality and being on the same side of the Atlantic Ocean as Conor Benn was not enough for Liam Smith to sugarcoat it. Conor Benn is not a world-class fighter. He's just been matched properly by the best promoter in the industry. A guy with a lot more know-how than Dana White, who's promoting Conor Benn now, and I don't think it's a coincidence that Conor's father, Nigel, wants him to go back and fight Chris Eubank Jr. again. On whose dime and for whose entertainment? The world agrees. Chris Eubank Jr. is shot to shit. Nobody's asking for that to be a trilogy, even though they're 1-1 with each other. That's how shot to shit Chris Eubank Jr. is, but in spite of that, Nigel said, I believe Eubank Jr. should have a third fight with Conor at super middle, and Conor would still do him. Probably because he's shot to shit. And you know that, Conor knows that, Chris Eubank Jr. knows that, the boxing community at large knows that. That's why they're not asking for a trilogy. But you are. Because you know the bell now tolls for your son. What Chris Eubank Jr. experienced, boiling down to 160, the toll that it took on his body, is the same toll that boiling down to 147 will take on your son's body. He hasn't fought there in 4 years. Would seem that karma is not without a sense of humor. In spite of the ominous forecast, the Ryan Garcia fight is still the right fight to make for Conor, even if certain defeat awaits, if for no other reason than Conor's limitations. A fighter as limited as Conor only has so many avenues to make money. You already did the nepotism thing with Chris Eubank Jr. You've already cashed in on your surname. There's not much chance of you developing into a pound-for-pound talent like a Canelo or a Crawford or an Usyk to make money that way. You don't have the talent or the adoring public of an Naoya Inoue to make money that way. You've got to get it when it comes, how it comes, and this is how. Get knocked the fuck out by Ryan. Because I think Ryan knocks him out, and I don't even like Ryan Garcia. I think he's another dickbag, but he is at least talented enough to beat a weight-drained Conor Benn. That's what he'll be at 147. Skeletor. You gotta do it. In some ways, you could interpret the fight as Conor Benn cashing in and cashing out. The guy's not long for the sport of boxing. No, I don't see him sticking around long enough to see himself become a gatekeeper, a journeyman, a punching bag for every young, talented fighter coming through. He's not gonna do that. He's trying to make as much money as fast as possible because he's not long for the sport of boxing. In super middleweight news, Resendiz's trainer envisions an all-out war with Munguia on May 2nd. Resendiz's team had negotiations for fights with Edgar Berlanga, Jermall Charlo, and Jaime Munguia. Ultimately, Munguia got the assignment May 2nd as part of a Cinco de Mayo weekend card headlined by David Benavidez and Gilberto Ramirez at the T-Mobile Arena in Vegas. Resendiz, the ring's number 6 super middleweight contender, champion really, will fight for the first time since May 31st, when he scored the ring's 2025 upset of the year by beating Caleb Plant via split decision. Trainer Manny Robles believes the upcoming All-American tilt for his fighter has the makings to be a shootout and a fight of the year candidate for this year. Munguia is a better fight for us, and it's the fight we wanted all along, Robles told the ring. Styles make fights, and this fight can be an absolute war. It has the makings to be a fight of the year. We may end up stealing the show. It's gonna be fun, exciting, crowd-pleasing fight. And an all-out war. Munguia last fought May 3rd. That's the night he avenged his 2024 Ring Magazine Upset of the Year loss to Bruno Surace, who knocked him out in the 6th, south of the border in Mexico. The win came with controversy, as Munguia tested positive for a banned substance. Munguia claimed that the failed test was caused by accidental contamination from pregnenolone, a legal, non-banned substance. The British Boxing Board of Control regulated the card on which Munguia beat Surace in Saudi. UK Anti-Doping, which works in conjunction with the BBBOC and the WBC, all absolved Munguia of any wrongdoing. But people have their own opinions. Jaime Munguia would be another fighter linked to Eddie Reynoso that pissed hot. Canelo Alvarez more famously than Oscar Valdez, now Jaime Munguia. It's a pattern. That issue aside, Robles believes a mature Resendiz will rock the more experienced Munguia. Armando has shown that he's grown tremendously, Robles said. He's learned from the loss against Elijah Garcia over 2 years ago. You learn more from defeats than you do from the wins. And Toro proved it in the plant fight. Armando is improving. His defense and footwork are better. He's become an even better fighter since beating Plant. You're going to see an even more complete Armando Resendiz on May 2nd, which is right around the corner. And what did I tell you all in my previous video? Armando and Manny are expecting the Jaime Munguia of old, the one who throws caution to the wind and leaves himself open for counters. That's not the Jaime they're going to get. They're going to get a more cautious and more tentative Jaime Munguia, one who's not holding his feet, one who's using his jab more, one who's showing better defense, doing a better job of keeping his hands at home. Eddie Reynoso's version of that fighter. And with Eddie Reynoso in his corner, I think that Jaime can win. I understand that Manny Robles has been responsible for some of the bigger upsets we've seen in the sport of boxing for the last 10 years or so. When Andy Ruiz shocked Anthony Joshua, that was Manny Robles in his corner. When Brendan Figueroa traveled to Liverpool in more recent years and shocked Nick Ball, got the upset, that was also Manny in his corner. And that was Manny in Armando Resendiz's corner when he upset Caleb Plant. But in that fight, I just don't read that much into it because I didn't see a dramatically different Armando Resendiz. He looked like the same fighter that he usually is. I just think Caleb was shot. I don't want to berate Manny as a trainer because I'm actually a fan of him. In fact, I'm a bigger fan of Manny Robles as a trainer than I am of Eddie Reynoso, but this is going to boil down to the fighters. And I don't think that Armando is a dramatically different fighter now than what he was before. I think Jaime is actually a better student. That's why. So soon after he started training with Freddie Roach, you saw a difference almost immediately. And the same thing happened when he started working with Eddie Reynoso. It's because he listens. It's because he's a good student. So, Armando Resendiz, in my opinion, may actually have the better corner, but Jaime Munguia is the better student. And on the night where they're expecting the Jaime Munguia of old to show up, they're going to get a different guy. More of a boxer. I don't expect much to change about Armando. He's going to barrel forward, try to apply pressure, and that's what's going to leave him open for punches. I think that Jaime is the bigger puncher of the two, albeit shell-shocked, because he got knocked out by Bruno. But being shell-shocked is what's going to cause him to be careful, to be cautious, to not take chances, to use his jab. Use your boxing. So you will have already heard me say this before. I have Jaime Munguia winning a points decision conservatively. I don't rule out a knockout, but at minimum, I think he can win on points. In those moments where Armando's getting hot and heavy, crashing the pocket, Jaime's got enough that he can fight him off. That's where a knockout could happen. But I do think he'll be a bit more mindful of the distance at which the fight is being fought and take care of himself. Enough that he can win on points.